Psychologists of Reddit, what made you realize you were treating a psychopath? Everybody always thinks of psychopaths as some clever, devious, Silence of the Lambs types, but what about the ones that are thick as two short planks? Plenty of them getting locked up in prisons every day. It's less oh no my primal fear receptors and more oh no, I have to listen to Barry the boring sea wax lyrical about himself for another hour. Pretty sure my ex is a good example of one who isn't the brightest bulb in the tanning bed. He is only out because the justice system where we lived refused to do much about it, and he managed to move before things caught up to him. Last I heard, he's still hiding from some of the things he did. Clinical psychologist here. At first I didn't know, if anything, given the context he was more put together than most of my patients. The subject of his criminal past came up. I only knew he had served prison time some years before, not what he was in for. I had met with him a month or two when this came up. Turns out it was 2 separate sentences served. Both were for physical debauchery. In both cases he was the exact thing we are afraid of, a guy lurking in a dark alley jumping a drunk girl. He told me about these things as if he was talking about the weather. When it dawned on me that he expressed no remorse or guilt whatsoever, I got the same cold, gut-wrenching kind of primal fear you feel when you're out for a walk and almost step on snake. When I was a student we had an interview with a lady that killed her baby child with a handgun because it cried so much that she couldn't take it. At first we weren't told that she was a psychopath and we were just told to listen to her side of the story. She was reading us from her journal that she made while she was in the institution. Not once did she mention that she was sad that her baby died, or how what she did was bad. She was just reading angry thoughts about her husband that left her and turned her in the police about what she did. She was justifying the killing because the baby was so unbearable, and once she mentioned that she was angry and mad that her husband did not believe her that she didn't have any other choice but to kill the baby. She was very smart and well spoken, and the whole time she was speaking she was trying to make us feel sorry for her for being locked up. We later learned that sometimes she was lying about not killing her baby and other times just brag about it, depending on who she was speaking with. Very normal looking person and very good speaker. Very normal looking person. This always makes me think about how many people like this I have interacted with up to this point in my life. When telling that he kept thinking about how killing people would be more fun than lame animals, stray cats and dogs and everything else he could catch. Only 11 years old. Current psychologist working in a prison here. I've worked with 3 individuals I dare say would have met the criteria for antisocial personality disorder within the last 2 weeks. One commonality is that they use behaviors as tools to benefit only themselves. Self-harm not because they wish to hurt themselves but to use it as a tool to lure staff into the cell to incite violence, gain extra medication, be sent to the SHU which comes with a status. Not a psych, but I was in the room where my mum was being evaluated. Well, I wasn't in the room. It was like a police interrogation room with a one-way glass. I was there because they needed to interview me for an outsider's perspective. Anyways, my mum got arrested on suspicion to commit a violent crime. To set the scene, she was handcuffed to a table and she was pee. She's always had volatile anger issues due to heavy drug and alcohol use. She was being talked to, questioned, all this other stuff. I was there for about 3 hours. She kept running this lady in circles to divert her from the actual problem. She was insanely calm, answering questions about various things that would scare a normal person. She barely showed empathy for anything and it was terrifying for me to watch. I knew she wasn't right in the head anyways. She was abusive to both my brother and I. But seeing how she handled the situation at hand, I'm glad I got out of there or it would have gotten much worse. I haven't talked to her in about 4 years, but she's tried to get in contact. I can't trust her and don't think I ever will again. Oh my, sorry to hear that. I'm glad you were able to turn out okay. What a nightmare. I am a mental health professional working in corrections, max security facility. In my experience, psychopaths will have this predatory stare, especially when they are trying to manipulate you. It is completely unnerving and hard to describe to someone unfamiliar with this population. They also tend to be narcissistic and overly charming, making a point to be overly friendly with you. Not a psychologist, but a nurse who sees way too many psych cases. One time I had a PT who was brought in after trying to break into a family's house while they were home. He was on my telemetry unit because his electrolytes were out of whack and he was acting like he didn't remember trying to bust into an entire family's house with them home. He was getting antsy, but the hospital I worked at had a stupid full risk policy that kept patients in bed, even if they were young, healthy, capable of being responsible for their full mental health. Patients like to pace, especially when they start to feel like they're using it. So, anyway, I'm trying to keep dude in bed because if his feet touched the floor a loud alarm would go off, pushing his crazy butt closer to the edge. So, I'm in there trying to talk to him and de-escalate. We're talking and he tells me he is a bad person, that his cat was mutilated and his sister asked what happened to it and he told her the dog did it. But, he told me that his secret is that he did it. He killed the cat so bad that it looked like a dog ripped it to pieces. He also shared with me that he knew what he was doing when he tried breaking into the family's home, and that he wants to hurt people. Of course, I shared this info with the hospitalist and the psychologist and, naturally, he was discharged free and clear the next day. No follow up with the law or outpatient psych. Gotta love it. I'm awake at 5 AM reading this now. I won't get any sleep thanks for that. I just double checked all my windows and doors. Psychopaths be in here taking notes on how to not get caught. Plot twist. It was a psychopath who wrote the question in the first place. Twist twist. It was you. You feel it in your gut first, using a validated measure, and constructing a thorough case history to discuss in supervision. This is how you test your gut feeling. But you feel it often quite quickly. It tends to begin with just a sense that something is off. When you're doing therapy with someone, we tend to build up quite a strong rapport with people. So there's lots of micromimicry going on, and you start to tune in quite deeply to unconscious body language. When you're in this state, sometimes you just start to feel very uneasy and you can't articulate verbally exactly why yet. This is often because of subtle micro-expressions, super fast flashes of emotion, lasting fractions of a second, that we perceive, but don't consciously register. You see flashes of contempt-related emotions and burglar smiles. Basically emotions related to dominance and deception. The next thing you'll notice is a lot of use of projection going on. This starts quite quickly, usually in an assessment session. I mean, as an aside, being assessed by someone else can feel quite threatening to anyone's self-image, let alone a psychopath's. Quite predictably there will be status challenges, asking you about your credentials, your experience etc, and then often some put downs and digs with plausible deniability. Joking that all psychologists are mad themselves, or just turning the tables by asking who's the maddest person you've ever treated. You start to feel on the back foot and like you're now being assessed by them. As time continues, they will attribute a lot of their own emotions to you as the projection deepens. Commenting that you look sad, asking if you're okay, or conversely asking why you got angry just then. As time passes, their affect turns from micro-expressions to more overt dominance displays, leaning back, smirking, getting up and striding around etc. By this point your initial gut feeling is getting more supportive evidence and it's time to bust out the validated measures. The biggest sign of all is a general unwillingness to show any vulnerability at all, or to be in a one-down position. The engagement will be superficial, often pally or matey, with lots of banter and joking, always flying close to the wind of outright mockery and contempt. They will start subtly and increasingly become overt in their need to control and dominate the therapy sessions. If the therapist maintains an aloof control, the ante may keep being raised and even end up with overt intimidation of the therapist. I'm on to you OP. Manipulate the psychologists into telling you how to avoid being caught out. Classic psychopath maneuver. And I'm on to you. Trying to undermine OP and make himself doubt, in your never-ending drive to manipulate and control others. Okay, so what's the difference between psychopathy and narcissism? People seem to be only focusing on how most psychopaths are narcissistic, but they're not really mentioning anything else. I'm autistic, and, because of my very low empathy, I come across as mildly psychopathic. However, I have very low self-esteem. I do not manipulate people, as far as I can tell. My former roommate, on the other hand, was a narcissist to a trash-steeped tea, to the point where she abused and manipulated me in so many ways over the course of a year. Yet the descriptions in this thread are conflating. So what other traits of a psychopath are there? What differentiates us? the eyes when they believe they're supposed to put on an emotion. You have to understand. It's going out when you bang your funny bone, even though it doesn't hurt, because all your life, people have cried out in pain when they've banged their elbow. You meet enough people like that and you find yourself hating any obligational situation in your life when you have to lie, like being asked how you are and saying good when you're not, simply because all you can associate it with is them. I say ouch when I get hurt in a video game or someone punches a table unpredictably. When describing some of the awful things he had done to people, he didn't express remorse, regret, or even anger. He expressed disdain. He was disdainful of people that he had irreparably harmed because he did not get enough out of it. He used them for his own ends and he genuinely believed that they had failed him. I typed out a long response to this but then deleted it because I couldn't really describe it without giving too many details away. One thing I will say is that psychopaths aren't all your classic murderous criminals. Sometimes the nicest people you'll meet are psychopaths, and it's all an act to manipulate you to do what they want, or think a certain way about them, because that makes them feel like they've won and or are superior to you. Watch out for the nice guys. I'm not a psychologist but I know a few, have studied it extensively, and my sister works with MH and the police. He told me he tried to care how people feel but he doesn't know how that would even come about. How do you know you care for someone? How do you not feel indifferent? He just said he has 3 emotions: indifference, anger and pity. So after reading a lot of these, it's worth mentioning the following. 1. Psychologists rarely even use the term psychopath anymore. Those disorders which would fall under the umbrella of psychopathy are preferred to the otherwise generic and easily confused term of psychopath. Note how many people frequently conflate psychopathy with narcissism. There's a narcissism personality disorder which fits many models of psychopathy, but not all so-called psychopaths are narcissists. 2. It often doesn't take training in psychology to spot so-called psychopaths. Formal training is needed to diagnose and treat it, but our brains are highly tuned to pick up on small things that our higher consciousness is often otherwise unaware of. This isn't to say that we should purely trust our gut. We are more often wrong than we'd like to admit, but how we feel about first impressions is often very important. 3. Far more people exhibit features of various psychopathic personality disorders than most realize. The vast majority of these people, however, live fairly ordinary, productive lives and don't exhibit violent tendencies. It has even been argued that psychopaths are an important evolutionary element, giving us people who can detach themselves from the human experience in order to provide valuable insights or behaviors the rest of us couldn't fathom. 4. Most of us will go through periods in our lives in which we often exhibit many symptoms of a personality disorder, but these are merely moments. They don't truly impact our lives in the way that a true disorder does. Not a psychologist but a counselor. They were talking about a disagreement they'd had with their partner, an accidental spillage of water onto some electronics. It could honestly happen to anyone. As calmly as if he was describing, I dunno, changing a channel. He started saying how he pinned his partner up against the wall and started trying to strangle her. No emotion, no change of tone, just as if it were a normal thing. I was a trainee at the time and not qualified to deal with DV. Needless to say, I transferred the client to another therapist. However, I was not allowed to end the session and had to sit with him for another 20 minutes. I've never been so scared in my life. I felt like a small prey animal trapped in the room with a predator. He just didn't care. However, if you met him you'd think he was just a normal, successful kinda average dude. I am 99% sure he was a sociopath, because he kept trying to get certain reactions out of me, kept changing his tactics, kept trying to charm me, and when I wouldn't rise to it became weirdly, coldly irritated. I've never had a client like it before or since. Not a psychologist but from my experience of dating a psychopath, didn't know until years in. A lot of what appears as emotion is simply mirroring emotions they see others exhibit and how they believe is the socially appropriate way to respond, whether or not they actually feel that way. This is how they blend in and appear normal to the average person. They are narcissistic, and everything revolves around them. They are always able to place blame on other people. Nothing is ever their fault. However, anything positive in their lives or others' lives is because of them. Because they are narcissists, they believe they are much more important than they actually are. They have strong influence over others because of their ability to feel nothing when manipulating others, and this is how they exert control over others. They will do whatever it takes in order to come out on top of a situation with no actual regard for others' lives or feelings. They may fake their feelings or reactions to continue to manipulate those around them, and they get pleasure over having control over other people and feeling like they're pulling all the strings. A good saying I heard went something along the lines of, "You never truly know someone until things don't go their way." Not a psychologist, but I read a story about a neurologist that did a brain scan on himself and found out he was a psychopath. He wrote a terrible emo book about it. His wife was not surprised, if I recall correctly. You have been visited by the IT lizard. Upvote or experience bad internet for a month. Thanks for watching. If you are new to the channel, you can subscribe. I publish new videos every day. Until then, check another video, or don't. Either way, have a great day, you magnificent people.